Welcome back to the channel. If you're here late at night looking for a story to drift off to, you're in the right place. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. In the quiet city of Arroyo Ridge, Texas, some stories begin like ordinary teenage dreams and end in ways no one could ever prepare for. Maya Collins was the kind of girl people remembered without trying. 17 years old, finishing her final year of high school, she balanced school, a part-time job at a clothing store, and big plans for college. Teachers described her as focused and polite. Friends described her as warm, funny, and a little too trusting for her own good. She lived with her mother, Elena, and her younger brother in a modest suburban home on the edge of town. Life had not always been easy. Her parents separated when she was 12, and although her father stayed in contact, it was inconsistent. Still, Maya never let bitterness take root. She had a habit of believing things would eventually work out. That optimism showed in everything she did. At school, she was known for her creativity. At work, she was reliable enough that her manager often trusted her with closing shifts. At home, she was the one who kept things light, even when money was tight or stress filled the air. By senior year, Maya had one clear goal. She wanted to study communications at a state university, something that would let her work in media or marketing someday. She had even started saving for her first semester. Outside of school and work, her social life was simple, a close circle of friends, a few weekend outings, nothing reckless. So when a coworker named Jordan suggested she meet one of his friends, she was hesitant at first. Jordan described him as polite, easygoing, someone who had recently moved back to town. After a few days of joking about it, Maya agreed to a casual meetup, nothing serious, just dinner and maybe a movie afterward. The plan was set for a Friday night. Maya spent that evening getting ready at home, laughing with her mother in the kitchen as she tried on different outfits. Elena teased her about being too careful, but Maya insisted she just wanted to feel comfortable. She finally chose a simple blue dress, light makeup, and her favorite pair of shoes. Before leaving, she told her mother she would be back by midnight, maybe a little later, but not much. Her mother didn't worry. Maya had always been responsible. At around 8:45 p.m., Maya left the house and drove her small silver sedan toward downtown Arroyo Ridge. The restaurant was in a busy area near a shopping strip, well lit and full of people. She arrived early and waited outside, texting Jordan to confirm they were still meeting. He replied that his friend was on the way. That was the last normal moment of her night. Witnesses later recalled seeing Maya standing near the entrance, checking her phone, occasionally looking around as if trying to spot someone she had never met. At 9:10 p.m., she got into her car briefly, then stepped out again. Security cameras captured her pacing slightly, still calm, still unaware of anything wrong. At 9:23 p.m., she withdrew a small amount of cash from an ATM a few blocks away. The footage showed her alone in the vehicle. She appeared relaxed, even smiling at something on her phone before driving back toward the restaurant area. She never made it inside. Around that same time, a dark vehicle had been circling the block more than once. Nothing unusual at first glance, just another car in a busy area, but later investigation would show it had been waiting. Maya parked again near the restaurant's entrance, but the man she was supposed to meet never arrived. Jordan texted her that his friend had gotten delayed. She stepped out of her car once more, standing near the sidewalk. That was when everything changed. Security footage from a nearby store captured a brief, unsettling sequence. A figure approached her vehicle from behind, dressed darkly, hooded, face obscured. There was no clear interaction visible, only a sudden movement toward the driver's side. Maya tried to step back. Then she disappeared from the camera's view as the scene shifted partially behind a parked truck. Within seconds, her car moved. slowly at first, then pulling away from the curb entirely. At 9:31 p.m., it left the area heading east out of the city. For the next several hours, there was no trace of her. Her mother became concerned when Maya didn't return home by midnight. Calls went unanswered, messages stayed unread. By afternoon, panic had set in. Elena contacted police that same day, reporting her daughter missing and describing the last outfit she had been wearing, along with details of her car. What investigators didn't yet know was that Maya's vehicle had already been found. The discovery came just across the state line in a dry stretch of land outside New Mexico. A patrol unit responding to a routine call noticed a silver sedan parked awkwardly off a dirt access road. There were no signs of forced abandonment, but something about it immediately raised concern. The passenger window had been damaged. Inside, the seats showed clear signs of disturbance. Personal belongings were scattered, and there were stains that suggested violence had taken place. The car was towed for forensic examination. Only hours later did the connection become clear. The vehicle matched the description of the missing teenager from Texas, but Maya herself was nowhere to be found. Search teams expanded into surrounding desert areas. Helicopters scanned miles of open land. Officers combed through terrain on foot. It wasn't until 2 days later that the case took a devastating turn. A group of hikers exploring an isolated area reported something unusual in the distance. What they initially thought was debris turned out to be something far worse. Authorities were called immediately. When investigators arrived, they confirmed the worst fears of Maya's family. The case was no longer a missing person investigation. It had become something much darker. And now, with no clear suspect, no witness willing to come forward, and only fragmented surveillance footage to rely on, detectives were forced to rebuild the night from scratch. But somewhere in those missing hours, someone made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. And Maya's story was only just beginning to unravel. By the time detectives confirmed Maya's identity, the case had already shifted from a disappearance to a full homicide investigation. The urgency changed everything. Roadblocks were set up along major routes out of Arroyo Ridge. Surveillance requests were sent to gas stations, toll points, and nearby towns. But whoever had taken Maya had not left an obvious trail. The silver sedan was the only physical lead, and even that offered limited answers. It had been abandoned in a remote stretch of land in New Mexico, far from any major highway camera coverage. Forensics confirmed what investigators already feared. Maya had been inside the vehicle after leaving the city, and there were signs of a violent struggle. But the timeline of what happened after that was still unclear. One detail stood out. The car showed no signs of theft. The keys were missing, but there were no forced entry marks. That suggested Maya had either been tricked into stopping or had encountered someone she did not see as a threat. Detectives began focusing heavily on her last known interaction, the blind meetup arranged through her coworker, Jordan. Both Jordan and the man he had introduced were brought in again for deeper questioning. Jordan insisted it had been a casual setup, something he thought was harmless. He said his friend had only recently returned to town, and it seemed normal in every interaction. That friend was identified as Lucas Mercer. Lucas was 24, living on the outskirts of a neighboring county. No criminal record, no history of violence. On paper, he looked unremarkable, cooperative, soft-spoken, the type of person easily overlooked. But inconsistencies began to appear during questioning. He admitted meeting Maya that night, but claimed she never stayed long enough for anything meaningful to happen. According to him, she had left suddenly after receiving a call and drove off on her own. He said he returned home shortly after. At first, there was no direct evidence to contradict him, but investigators had already pulled traffic camera data from surrounding intersections. One partial clip changed the direction of the case entirely. It showed Maya's silver sedan leaving the restaurant area, followed closely by another vehicle, same direction, same timing, no obvious gap between them. That second vehicle was registered to Lucas Mercer. When confronted with the footage, Lucas adjusted his statement. He said he had left separately and simply happened to be on the same road, nothing more. It wasn't enough. Forensic teams also recovered partial trace evidence from the abandoned sedan in New Mexico, a fiber sample that did not match Maya's clothing or known environment. It matched upholstery found in Lucas's car. The case began tightening around him. Meanwhile, Maya's family was breaking apart under pressure. Her mother refused to leave the house, her brother stopped attending school. Every day brought new updates, most of them incomplete, none of them comforting. Then a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A gas station clerk about 40 miles outside of Royal Ridge came forward after seeing news coverage. She remembered a young woman in a silver car that night, but what stood out was the behavior of the person following shortly after. A man who purchased fuel, gloves, and water, paying in cash and avoiding eye contact. The timing matched Lucas's known route. A search warrant was issued immediately. When officers arrived at Lucas Mercer's residence, he was not there. The house was empty but not untouched. Items had been hastily packed, a phone was missing, and in the garage, investigators found cleaning supplies and traces of soil consistent with the desert area where Maya's car had been abandoned. A nationwide alert was issued. For 2 days, Lucas remained missing. Then, a highway patrol's unit spotted his vehicle near a rest stop outside Tucson. He was taken into custody without incident. At first, he refused to speak. Then, after hours of interrogation, he began to shift his account again. This time, the story changed completely. He admitted that things had escalated inside the car after leaving Arroyo Ridge. According to his statement, Maya had tried to leave the situation after realizing something was wrong. He claimed there was an argument, a struggle, and that in a moment of panic, things went too far. Investigators pressed him on specifics, but his answers were inconsistent. Pieces didn't align with forensic evidence, the timeline was fragmented, and parts of his statement directly contradicted physical findings from the vehicle. What remained clear was intent, not a random encounter gone wrong, but a pattern of control, escalation, and deliberate concealment afterward. Lucas was charged with first-degree homicide, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. During trial preparation, prosecutors laid out a structured timeline using surveillance, digital data, and forensic reconstruction. The defense attempted to argue emotional instability and lack of premeditation, but the prosecution focused on the sequence leading up to the disappearance, showing calculated movement across multiple locations and efforts to avoid detection. The jury reached a verdict in under a week, guilty on all major counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Maya's family, the verdict brought legal closure, but not emotional resolution. Her mother described it as a sentence that ended a case, but not the pain. Her room remained unchanged at home. Her belongings were untouched. The silence after the investigation felt heavier than the crime itself. In Arroyo Ridge, the case changed how parents spoke to their children, how young people approached online introductions, and how quickly trust could shift into danger without warning. There was no dramatic explanation that made everything make sense, no final piece that restored what was lost, just a simple, devastating reality. One decision, one meeting, one person hiding behind normalcy, and a life that should have continued forward, stopped far too early.
In fast-growing cities, success often hides tension that slowly builds beneath the surface. When money, ambition, and relationships mix inside a family-run business, things can look perfect from the outside while quietly falling apart inside. That was exactly the case in the story of Elena Whitmore, a woman whose disappearance would later expose a chain of secrets no one saw coming. Elena Marie Whitmore was born on June 3, 1990, in Orlando, Florida. She grew up in a modest household with her mother, Sandra Whitmore, and her father, Ronald Pierce. Her parents separated when she was still in middle school, and her father moved out of state shortly after. Although Ronald stayed in touch at first, the connection slowly faded over the years. Elena stayed with her mother, who later remarried a small business owner named David Collins. With this new family setup, Elena helped care for her younger half-brother, Ethan, while also focusing on school. She was known for being disciplined, organized, and highly ambitious. Even as a teenager, she had a clear goal in mind. She wanted to build something of her own. During high school, Elena met Marcus Whitmore, a quiet but determined young man who worked part-time while studying technical engineering. Marcus came from a military background, having grown up in a disciplined household. He and Elena connected over their shared focus on building a stable future. Their relationship developed slowly but steadily. After graduation, Marcus joined the Air Force, while Elena enrolled in business school. Despite distance and long deployments, they stayed committed to each other. By their mid-20s, they decided to get married in a small ceremony attended only by close family. Shortly after, Marcus was stationed in Texas, and Elena moved with him. She completed her degree in business administration and soon after gave birth to their daughter, Lily Whitmore. It was during this period that the couple began building what would eventually become their most important shared venture. They started with a single assisted living home for elderly residents. The idea was simple but effective: provide quality care in a comfortable environment. Elena managed operations, staffing, and finances, while Marcus handled logistics and security planning when he was not deployed. The business grew faster than expected. Within a few years, they opened multiple facilities across Texas. Their reputation for reliable care attracted investors, and soon they were managing a network of properties worth millions. On the outside, they looked like a strong couple building a lasting legacy. By 2018, Marcus transitioned out of active military duty to focus more on the business. He believed full involvement would strengthen both their company and their marriage. But instead, the pressure of expansion and control began creating distance between them. Elena became more independent, making executive decisions without always consulting Marcus. At the same time, she quietly began restructuring parts of the business under her own name. She also reconnected with an old acquaintance from Jamaica, a man named Adrian Blake, who had once been part of her early life before she moved to the United States. Their communication remained private, but Marcus eventually became aware of it. Tension inside the marriage grew sharper. Arguments became frequent, mostly about control over finances and ownership of their growing empire. By early 2019, staff members noticed changes in Elena's routine. She appeared stressed, worked longer hours, and occasionally missed scheduled meetings. Her assistant, Natalie Brooks, was one of the first to notice something was off. On March 14, 2019, Elena failed to show up for a morning board meeting. Her phone was switched off, which was highly unusual. Natalie tried contacting her repeatedly before driving to her home later that afternoon. When she arrived, the front gate was closed but unlocked. The house appeared usually quiet. Calling out received no response. As she walked toward the backyard, she noticed something unsettling near a storage shed, a burned patch of ground with remnants of fabric and partially melted material. Alarmed, she entered the house. Inside, the atmosphere felt wrong. The living room was undisturbed, but in the hallway she noticed faint dark marks on the floor and what looked like cleaning residue near the baseboards. She immediately contacted authorities. Police arrived within the hour and began securing the property. Early observations suggested that the house had been recently cleaned in a rush. In the master bedroom, investigators detected a strong chemical smell consistent with industrial cleaning agents. Small traces of blood were later found on a wall corner and near a door handle. Marcus Whitmore was not present at the time. His phone was unreachable. Their daughter Lily was later confirmed to be safe at Marcus's mother's residence. When officers reviewed vehicle records, they noted that one of the couple's cars, a black SUV registered to Marcus, had been used earlier that morning. It had been returned to the garage, but its tires showed signs of driving through rough terrain. Marcus returned home later that evening. He appeared visibly tense and confused by the police presence. When questioned, he stated that he and Elena had argued the previous night. According to him, he left the house to cool off and assumed she had also gone out afterwards. He claimed that when he returned in the morning, she was gone. He said he tried calling her multiple times and then took their daughter to his mother's house while attempting to locate Elena. However, investigators quickly found inconsistencies. Phone records showed Marcus's device had been turned off for a significant portion of the night. Additionally, surveillance footage from a nearby hardware store showed him purchasing items late at night, including heavy-duty trash bags, gloves, a shovel, and cleaning supplies, all paid in cash. At first, this alone was not enough for charges, but forensic testing soon confirmed that the traces of blood found inside the home matched Elena's DNA profile. As suspicion intensified, Marcus was taken in for further questioning. A search warrant was approved for both the residence and vehicles. During this time, investigators discovered something even more concerning. Marcus had recently purchased a firearm and ammunition, but never registered it for use. Security footage confirmed the purchase, though he was seen leaving the items behind at the counter without taking them. Shortly after, Marcus was formally detained. He did not resist arrest. The case had now shifted from a missing person report into a full criminal investigation. Still, without a body and with limited direct evidence, authorities faced a difficult challenge. Then, just as the search expanded across rural areas outside the city, a discovery would soon change everything. For weeks after Elena Whitmore disappeared, the investigation moved in circles. Detectives had blood evidence, suspicious purchases, and a strained marriage under pressure, but still no body. Without that final piece, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. Marcus Whitmore stayed in custody during most of the investigation, but maintained the same version of events. He insisted there had been a fight, that he left to cool off, and that when he returned, Elena was already gone. He repeated the same detail every time. He had no idea what happened after that. But investigators were not convinced. The evidence kept pointing back to him, even if it didn't yet explain the full sequence of events. The breakthrough came nearly 4 months later. A ranch owner named Calvin Reeves was inspecting his property on the outskirts of Bexley County, a sparsely populated rural area outside Orlando. While checking fence lines near an overgrown section of land, he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor coming from a patch of tall grass. At first, he assumed it was an animal carcass, but when he followed the smell, he found something far worse. Partially buried beneath brush and soil were human remains in an advanced state of decomposition. Authorities were immediately called to the scene. The area was secured, and forensic teams began recovery. The remains were badly deteriorated, but personal effects nearby helped narrow the identification quickly. A bracelet engraved with the initials EW was found nearby, along with fragments of clothing. DNA testing confirmed it within days. The body belonged to Elena Whitmore. The medical examiner determined that she had suffered severe blunt force trauma to the head. The injuries were consistent with being struck with a heavy object. A partially recovered metal tool found during the investigation later matched trace evidence from the site. There were also signs that the body had been moved after death and partially exposed to fire. However, the burning had been incomplete, leaving forensic evidence intact enough for analysis. This discovery changed the entire direction of the case. With a confirmed death, prosecutors could finally build a homicide charge. Marcus Whitmore was re-interviewed, this time with the body evidence presented directly to him. At first, he remained firm, but as investigators laid out the timeline, including his purchases, his movements, and the forensic findings, his story began to shift. Eventually, Marcus requested to speak in detail. What followed was a fractured and emotionally unstable confession. He admitted that the argument between him and Elena had escalated far more than he originally described. According to his statement, the conflict was about control over the business and money. He claimed Elena had recently moved assets into accounts under her name and had planned to restructure ownership of their facilities. Marcus said he felt pushed out of his own company and feared losing access to both his life's work and his daughter. On the night in question, he said the argument turned physical. He admitted there was a struggle inside the house. In that moment, he struck Elena with a heavy object during the confrontation. He insisted it was not planned, but a reaction during the fight. Afterward, he said he panicked. He described attempting to clean the scene and destroy evidence using industrial cleaning supplies. He admitted to burning items in the backyard, but claimed he did not intend to fully conceal what had happened. He then transported Elena's body away from the house and left it on rural land outside the city. Marcus also admitted that he returned later and attempted to further destroy evidence using fire, but the attempt failed. Despite his confession, he maintained one point consistently. He claimed he did not intend for Elena to die, describing the event as a loss of control rather than a planned act. Prosecutors rejected that argument. The physical evidence, combined with his prior actions, purchases tools, cleanup attempts, disposal efforts, and inconsistent statements, painted a clear picture of deliberate concealment. The trial began in early 2023 after repeated delays. The defense tried to frame Marcus as a man under extreme emotional and financial pressure, arguing that the relationship had collapsed under the weight of business disputes and mistrust. They suggested the incident was not premeditated, but the result of escalating conflict. Prosecutors countered with a more structured timeline. They highlighted the preparation, the purchases, the cleanup effort, and the disposal of the body as actions that required planning and time, not a momentary loss of control. Forensic experts testified that the injuries were consistent with repeated force, not a single accidental strike. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Marcus Whitmore was found guilty of manslaughter and evidence tampering. The court rejected the charge of premeditated homicide due to uncertainty about intent, but still held him fully responsible for Elena's death and the attempts to conceal it. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 15. Custody of their daughter was awarded to Elena's mother, who moved her out of state shortly after the trial to start over away from the case. What remained with investigators was not just a case file, but a pattern they had seen before. Relationships built on shared ambition slowly turning into conflict when power, money, and control stopped being equal. And in Elena Whitmore's case, that imbalance became irreversible.